If you spend enough time on certain corners of the internet, you'll eventually run into a popular theory. Jesus of Nazareth never actually existed. The claim is that he's a composite character, an amalgamation of ancient pagan myths cooked up centuries after the fact. Historians have spent centuries trying to dig past the theology to find the actual breathing human being. This quest to uncover the historical Jesus, famously summarized by scholars like Albert Schweitzer, is one of the most rigorous pursuits in modern academia. To do this objectively, historians apply a ruthless rule. If we want to prove the man Christ Jesus walked the earth, we have to completely throw out the New Testament. No Gospels, no letters from Paul. We have to rely entirely on extra-biblical archives. That means looking for hard data in the records of the Roman Empire and checking the accounts of first-century Jewish historians who had absolutely no reason to worship him. The ultimate historical stress test is finding corroborating facts in the writings of people who either hated early Christians or viewed them with total apathy. We start with Cornelius Tacitus. He was an elite Roman senator and one of antiquity's greatest historians, writing around the year 116. In Book 15 of his Annals, Tacitus recounts a massive fire that devastated Rome during the reign of Emperor Nero. Nero was suspected of starting the blaze himself. To deflect the blame, he targeted a despised underground sect the crowd called the Christians. Tacitus then drops a terse factual clarification for his Roman readers. He writes that the founder of this name, Christus, had been executed during the reign of Emperor Tiberius by the procurator Pontius Pilate. That detail about Pilate is crucial. It acts as a verified historical data point that locks in the exact time and place of the execution, matching the established timeline of Roman governance in Judea.
Tacitus despised Christians, and he certainly wasn't repeating their theology. As a senator and a former provincial governor, he had direct access to official Roman archives and a mandate to verify imperial facts. This single hostile Roman record independently verifies the specific time, the geographic location, and the authoritative manner of Jesus' death. Moving from Roman to Jewish records, we find Flavius Josephus. He was an aristocratic first-century Jewish historian, writing to explain his culture to a Roman audience. In Book 20 of his massive work, Jewish Antiquities, Josephus casually mentions a local political dispute that resulted in the execution of a man named James. But there was a problem. In first-century Judea, the names James and his father Joseph were incredibly common. Josephus needed a highly specific identifier so his readers would know exactly which James had been put to death. His solution was to identify this James purely by his relation to a more famous brother. Josephus writes that the authorities brought in the brother of Jesus who is called Messiah, James by name. To a historian, this kind of incidental, functional reference is the gold standard of proof. It only works if the author assumes the audience already knows that this Jesus was a real, recognizable person. We can see this full text block from Book 18 of Josephus's writings, a longer passage about Jesus known as the Testimonium Flavianum. But there's a snag. The text contains glowing phrases like, "He was the Messiah," something an orthodox, Roman-aligned Jew like Josephus would never write. This forces an academic dilemma. Did a medieval Christian monk forge this entire passage out of thin air? Or did they just embellish a genuine text? Historians approach this by stripping away the obvious scribal additions to isolate the original author's words. The redacted text that remains perfectly matches Josephus's standard, neutral writing style. It reveals that an authentic core record, confirming Jesus as a wise teacher who was crucified by Pilate, always existed right underneath the forgery. When we aggregate the unvarnished facts from the independent records of a Roman senator and a Jewish historian, a clear baseline emerges. We can compare this hard data with the writings of ancient philosophers and critics who deeply opposed early Christianity. They mocked Jesus as a magician, a charlatan, or a criminal. But notably, none of them ever tried to argue he was a myth. There is a strict boundary between history and theology. Secular archives cannot prove miracles, and they do not prove a resurrection. What they do prove is the physical existence of the man. Despite modern internet theories to the contrary, the surviving historical archives of antiquity are unanimous. Jesus of Nazareth actually lived.